Heavy, suffocating silence fell over the private dining room as my mother handed my 7-year-old daughter a basket of cold dinner rolls while serving my sister's children $120 dry-aged prime steaks. My father sneered across the linen tablecloth that I should have packed her a sandwich from home if I expected her to eat, prompting my sister's daughters to giggle maliciously. I quietly set my napkin down, looked my mother dead in the eye, and whispered a single word: noted. 2 weeks later, the commercial lease termination and master debt acceleration hit my parents' boutique catering empire, turning their 40-year legacy into total bankruptcy. My name is Ella Marshall. To understand how a cruel meal exclusion at the Oak and Iron Prime Steakhouse in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, triggered the total financial collapse of my parents' lifestyle, you have to look inside the toxic, favoritism-driven dynamic of the Marshall family. In our household, love was never unconditional. It was a currency used to reward obedience and penalize anyone who dared to build an independent life. My father, Samuel Marshall, was a controlling, arrogant businessman who built a moderate reputation operating Marshall Heritage Gourmet Catering, a boutique catering firm and historic event hall in the French Quarter of Charleston. My mother, Beatrice, was a shallow, image-conscious woman who spent her life coddling my older sister, Natalie, while treating me as an unappreciated domestic servant. Natalie was 2 years older than me and lived as the undisputed golden child. She was vain, financially irresponsible, and utterly dependent on my parents. When Natalie married a fast-talking, unsuccessful real estate speculator named Darren, my parents bought them a 5-bedroom home in Mount Pleasant, paid for their luxury SUVs, and fully funded the private schooling for Natalie's 2 daughters, Ava and Mia. I chose a completely different path. After watching my parents manipulate family members with money throughout my childhood, I vowed never to owe them a single dime. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through the College of Charleston, earning a Bachelor of Science in Urban Land Economics and a master's degree in Commercial Real Estate Finance. At 32, I was a senior managing partner at Palmetto Commercial Asset Trust, a premier commercial real estate investment firm managing over $200 million in retail, hospitality, and mixed-use properties across the South Carolina coast. Despite my professional success, my parents treated my daughter, Nora, and me with cold indifference. Nora was a sweet, perceptive 7-year-old girl who excelled in school and loved drawing. Yet Beatrice and Samuel constantly excluded Nora from family outings, showered Natalie's daughters with designer gifts, and openly criticized my choice to raise Nora as a successful single mother following my divorce 3 years prior. I tolerated their subtle slights for years, maintaining a polite distance to allow Nora to have a relationship with her grandparents. But I underestimated just how cruel and malicious Beatrice and Samuel could be when given an audience. The breaking point occurred on a humid Friday evening in October. Beatrice organized a formal family dinner at the Oak and Iron Prime Steakhouse, an exclusive white-cloth dining establishment located in the heart of historic downtown Charleston. The dinner was ostensibly arranged to celebrate Natalie's 35th birthday and mark the conclusion of a successful summer catering season for my parents.
Beatrice called me 2 weeks prior, stressing that attendance was mandatory. "Ella, make sure you and Nora are dressed appropriately," Beatrice instructed sharply over the phone. "This is a high-end establishment. Do not embarrass us." I arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock, holding Nora's hand. Nora looked adorable in a navy blue dress, her hair neatly styled, holding a small sketchbook she had brought along. We were escorted to a private dining room in the back of the steakhouse. Samuel, Beatrice, Natalie, Darren, and their 2 daughters, Ava and Mia, were already seated around a large mahogany table, decorated with fresh white roses in crystal glassware. Ava and Mia, aged 9 and 11, were dressed in expensive party dresses, playing loudly on their iPads, while my mother lavished them with praise. When Nora and I sat down at the far end of the table, Beatrice didn't even look up to greet her granddaughter. She simply motioned for the head server, a tall man named Marcus, to begin serving the pre-ordered multi-course meal. "Marcus, we are ready for the primary course," Beatrice announced grandly, fanning herself with a leather menu. "As I specified in my advance reservation order 2 weeks ago, bring out the signature dry-aged bone-in tomahawk steaks for the adults and the young ladies." 10 minutes later, 3 tuxedoed waiters entered the room carrying heavy silver trays. They set down massive, sizzling 12-ounce bone-in prime ribeyes, priced at $120 each, in front of Samuel, Beatrice, Natalie, Darren, and their 2 daughters, Ava and Mia. Beside each plate was a side of truffle mashed potatoes and grilled asparagus. Then the waiter approached Nora's place setting. Instead of a steak or a child's entree, the The waiter placed a single silver breadbasket containing 3 cold dinner rolls and a small dish of whipped butter directly in front of my 7-year-old daughter. Nora looked down at the breadbasket, then looked over at her cousin's plates overflowing with steak and gourmet sides. Her lower lip began to tremble, but she bit her lip and kept quiet, clutching her sketchbook under the table. I felt a sudden, icy surge of adrenaline shoot through my veins. I turned to my mother, keeping my voice low and steady. "Mom, where is Nora's food? Did the kitchen make a mistake with the order?" Beatrice took a slow sip of her Cabernet Sauvignon, dabbed her lips with a cloth napkin, and looked at me with an expression of cold, smug satisfaction. "There is no mistake, Ella," Beatrice said smoothly, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet dining room. "I pre-ordered and paid for the meal 2 weeks ago. I ordered the $120 steaks for Ava and Mia because they are accustomed to fine dining and know how to behave. I didn't order anything for your daughter." I stared at my mother, completely stunned by the sheer, unprovoked malice. "You pre-ordered $120 steaks for every granddaughter at this table except Nora? She is 7 years old, Beatrice." My father, Samuel, cut in, leaning across the table and glaring at me with narrow, impatient eyes. "Stop making a scene, Ella. Steak is expensive, and Beatrice didn't want to waste money on a child who probably won't even finish it. If you knew your daughter was going to be hungry, you should have brought her something from home." Natalie let out a sharp, mocking laugh, taking a sip of her cocktail. "Honestly, Ella, don't be so dramatic. Nora has bread. Kids her age eat roll baskets all the time. You're just looking for a reason to ruin my birthday." Ava and Mia snickered into their cloth napkins, pointing at Nora's breadbasket.
Nora looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and whispered softly, "Mommy, am I bad? Why don't Grandma and Grandpa like me?" Her innocent, heartbroken question broke something inside me forever. In that exact moment, 29 years of seeking my parents' approval, tolerating their emotional abuse, and swallowing my pride evaporated into pure, crystalline resolve. I didn't yell, I didn't throw a glass, I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I reached down, placed my hand gently over Nora's small fingers, and looked directly across the table at my mother and father. "Noted," I said softly, my voice smooth as ice. "What did you say?" Beatrice snapped, frowning. Before she could answer, the head server, Marcus, walked back into the private dining room to check on the table. I stood up from my chair, smoothing my blazer. I took my leather executive wallet from my purse and pulled out my corporate black card. "Marcus," I called out, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority that silenced the entire room. The head server rushed over immediately. "Yes, Miss Marshall? Is everything to your satisfaction?" "No, Marcus, it is not," I announced clearly, making sure every guest in the private room and the adjacent main dining area could hear every word. "My mother pre-ordered $120 steaks for everyone at this table, while intentionally leaving my 7-year-old daughter with a basket of bread. I want you to immediately cancel my mother's credit card authorization for this reservation." Beatrice's jaw dropped open. "Ella, what do you think you are doing?" "Marcus," I continued, ignoring my mother entirely. "Please transfer the entire table's bill onto my personal black card. In addition, I want you to bring my daughter the executive chef's $350 A5 Japanese Wagyu tasting menu, a seafood tower, and the full dessert sampler." Marcus's eyes widened in respect. "Right away, Miss Marshall." "Wait!" Samuel yelled, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Ella, sit down. You are embarrassing this family in front of the staff." I turned to my father, looking at him with total detachment. "And, Marcus," I added, looking the head server straight in the eye, "once you bring my daughter's Wagyu tasting menu, please pack my parents' and sisters' plates into go boxes and escort them out of this private room. I paid for this table, and their presence at my meal is officially terminated." The private dining room went dead silent. Natalie gasped in horror. "You can't kick us out. It's my birthday." "I just did," I replied smoothly. 2 minutes later, the restaurant manager, who recognized me instantly because my investment firm held the master commercial deed to the entire King Street dining pavilion, stepped into the room. He politely informed my parents, sister, and brother-in-law that their meal had been paid for by Miss Marshall, but their reservation in the private suite was concluded, and they needed to step out to the main foyer. Humiliated, furious, and clutching their cardboard go boxes, Samuel, Beatrice, Natalie, and Darren were escorted out of the private room under the bewildered stares of 30 restaurant patrons. Nora and I spent the next hour enjoying an extraordinary meal. Nora ate delicious Wagyu steak, laughed with the staff, and drew beautiful pictures in her sketchbook while eating a chocolate melt cake. When we left the restaurant, I kissed my daughter on the forehead and made a silent vow. My parents would never hurt my child again. But my response didn't end at the steakhouse. I knew my parents' financial vulnerabilities better than anyone. While Samuel boasted about his success running Marshall Heritage Gourmet Catering, his business was built on a house of cards held together by my quiet indulgence. For over 40 years, Marshall Heritage Catering operated out of a 4,000-square-foot historic commercial venue in the French Quarter of Charleston. 3 years prior, the original property owner had placed the commercial building up for sale. To prevent my parents from losing their venue, I had quietly used my real estate firm, Palmetto Commercial Asset Trust, to purchase the building's master deed for $1.8 million. Because Samuel was my father, I had permitted him to operate his catering business under a flexible, below-market tenancy agreement, charging him only $2,000 a month in rent, less than a third of the commercial market value, while allowing him to defer maintenance fees. Furthermore, 6 months prior, Samuel had approached me begging for financial assistance to upgrade his commercial kitchen equipment. Instead of giving him a personal loan, my private asset holding company had underwritten a $250,000 commercial equipment mortgage secured by a secondary lien on my parents' personal residence in Mount Pleasant. Samuel had been making interest-only payments, relying on my family goodwill to keep the debt active without paying down the principal. My parents believed they were invincible. They thought they could publicly degrade my daughter, treat me like a servant, and continue enjoying the massive financial umbrella I provided for their business. They were about to learn what happened when that umbrella was ripped away. On Monday morning, exactly 48 hours after the steakhouse incident, I sat down at my desk in my downtown Charleston office and called my lead corporate real estate attorney, Harrison Vance. "Harrison," I said, setting my coffee cup down, "I want a comprehensive structural and commercial lease audit initiated on the French Quarter commercial property occupied by Marshall Heritage Catering." "What are our parameters, Ella?" Harrison asked. "Enforce every strict covenant in the master lease," I instructed coldly. "Reevaluate their tenancy to full commercial market rates immediately. Issue a 30-day notice of rent adjustment from $2,000 to $7,500 a month. Conduct a mandatory fire safety and building code inspection, and initiate a formal call on the $250,000 commercial equipment mortgage under the material breach clause." Harrison whistled softly over the phone. "Ella, a rent tripling combined with a mortgage acceleration will force them into immediate cash flow insolvency within 2 weeks." "Executed," I replied. Over the next 14 days, a legal tidal wave descended upon my parents' business. Exactly 2 weeks after my mother handed my daughter a breadbasket at the Oak and Iron Prime Steakhouse, the formal legal notices were served by a deputy sheriff at my parents' catering kitchen in the French Quarter. First, my parents received the commercial lease adjustment notice, informing them that their monthly rent was increasing from $2,000 to $7,500 a month, effective immediately, alongside a demand for $30,000 in backdated property insurance escrow. Second, a municipal building inspector, acting on a mandatory structural audit requested by the property owner, found 22 severe code violations in my father's outdated kitchen equipment, issuing an immediate operational stop work order until $200,000 in structural upgrades were completed. Finally, my holding company issued a formal notice of acceleration on the $250,000 commercial equipment mortgage, declaring the full principal balance due within 10 business days due to unapproved structural modifications made to the real estate. Panic erupted inside the Marshall family. Without an operational kitchen, my father was forced to cancel 12 high-paying autumn weddings and corporate galas, incurring over $100,000 in immediate breach of contract penalties from angry clients. Unable to pay the $7,500 rent, facing a $200,000 kitchen renovation order, and hit with a $250,000 mortgage demand, Marshall Heritage Gourmet Catering collapsed like a deck of cards. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, my phone rang 34 times. It was my mother, Beatrice. I answered on the 35th call, placing my phone on speaker as I worked on my laptop. "Ella?" Beatrice shrieked into the receiver, her voice hysterical and cracking with tears. "Ella, you have to help us. The sheriff just came to the catering hall and posted an eviction warning on the front door. The bank is threatening to foreclose on our house in Mount Pleasant." "I know, Beatrice," I said smoothly, taking a sip of tea. "I signed those documents." A sharp gasp sounded over the line. "What? Beatrice screamed, her voice echoing through the speaker. You signed them? You own the building? You own our mortgage? My investment company owns the commercial property and the secondary deed on your house, yes, I replied, my voice cool and unbothered. How can you do this to your own mother and father? Beatrice sobbed, shifting instantly from anger to pathetic begging. We're your parents, Ella. We gave you life. We raised you. You're destroying your father's 40-year business over a stupid misunderstanding at a restaurant? I leaned forward. My tone dropped into an icy, razor-sharp register that chilled her through the phone. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Beatrice, I said, every word dripping with absolute finality. 2 weeks ago, you sat at a dining table in front of our entire family and handed my 7-year-old daughter a basket of bread while buying $120 steaks for Natalie's children. You looked me in the eye and told me my child wasn't worth feeding. Ella, it was just a steak. I was just trying to save money. No, Beatrice, I corrected her coldly. You were trying to hurt my child to show me that you considered us inferior. You thought you could degrade my daughter, parade your cruel favoritism, and continue using my financial generosity to fund your lifestyle. Ella, please, Beatrice begged, weeping hysterically. Your father is having chest pains. We'll lose the house. Natalie won't be able to pay her daughter's private school tuition if the catering business closes. Please, we'll apologize to Nora. We'll buy her anything she wants. Nora doesn't want your money, Beatrice, and she will never see your faces again. You taught me 2 weeks ago that family is about who gets a seat at the table. I took your advice. You've been removed from mine. I ended the call, blocked her number, and instructed my legal team to proceed with full judicial enforcement. The financial collapse of my parents' empire was absolute and unyielding. Unable to raise $500,000 in cash within 10 days, Marshall Heritage Gourmet Catering filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, surrendering all equipment and liquidating its assets. The historic French Quarter venue was taken over by my firm, renovated and leased to an elite national restaurant group for $10,000 a month. To satisfy the secondary mortgage debt on their residence, Samuel and Beatrice were forced to surrender their 5-bedroom Mount Pleasant home in a short sale. Stripped of their business, their status, and their wealth, my parents were forced to downsize into a small 2-bedroom rental apartment on the outskirts of North Charleston, living off a minimal monthly Social Security stipend. My sister, Natalie, suckered her own severe reality check. Without her parents' catering profits to fund her lifestyle, her husband's failed real estate ventures caught up with them. They were forced to sell their luxury vehicles, remove their daughters from private school, and enroll them in local public schools. Natalie was forced to take a full-time job as a retail clerk to pay her mortgage. Meanwhile, Nora and I flourished. Free from the toxic cloud of my family's cruelty, Nora grew into a confident, joyful young girl who excelled in her art classes and academics. I expanded my commercial real estate portfolio across South Carolina, building a legacy of genuine wealth, security, and integrity. Sitting on the sun-drenched porch of my Charleston home on a quiet Sunday morning, watching Nora happily paint watercolors at a wooden easel in the garden, I feel a deep, unshakable sense of peace. I proved that a mother's primary duty is to protect her child's dignity, and when toxic relatives mistake your patience for weakness, showing them the door is the ultimate act of love. Educational lesson. This narrative illustrates critical legal principles regarding commercial lease enforcement, debt acceleration clauses, and master property deeds. Commercial lease default and market adjustment clauses. Commercial real estate leases operate under strict contractual terms separate from residential tenancy protections. A property owner holding a master deed holds the legal right to enforce strict lease covenants, adjust rents to fair market value upon lease renewal, and demand strict adherence to municipal building and fire safety codes. Debt acceleration clauses in commercial mortgages. A mortgage acceleration clause allows a lender to demand the immediate, full payment of an outstanding loan balance if the borrower commits a material breach of contract, such as making unauthorized structural alterations or defaulting on underlying property obligations. Secondary liens and judicial foreclosure. A secondary deed of trust secured against real estate grants the lien holder the right to initiate judicial foreclosure proceedings if the debtor fails to satisfy accelerated debt demands, ensuring the debt is satisfied through asset liquidation. Personal advice. If you have a child who is intentionally excluded, degraded, or treated as second class by toxic grandparents or family members, do not teach your child to tolerate emotional abuse for the sake of family harmony. Never allow anyone, regardless of their relation, to make your child feel unworthy or lesser than others. Establish firm, uncompromising boundaries, withdraw your presence and financial support from those who disrespect your household, and create a loving environment where your child's dignity is always fiercely protected.